Alrighty, so the next big topic we're going to attack in our study of the Renaissance is the idea of humanism. And look at the term here. What is kind of the primary word in humanism? It's human. And so it's the idea of focusing on the human, the person, versus maybe the idea of the church. And that's kind of where that we're going to see this first split and start going more towards the secular things versus going towards church-based ideas in Europe. And so it's really kind of the base of the Renaissance. Part of the Renaissance, and the idea is that it was a revival of Greek and Rome text that we were bringing back, if you will, the text and starting to read again the text of the Roman philosophers, of the Greek philosophers, and study of those languages again. One of the theories, especially Burckhardt's theory, was that these languages weren't being spoken anymore, except for the church, maybe. Okay, these languages weren't being spoken. These ancient writers, really smart guys, weren't being read anymore. Guys like Livy and Cicero and Plato, and that they started bringing them back, and they actually started reading them again. And really, people start looking at individualism. Okay, first off, what can the individual person do? That's the idea that you're a person, you mean nothing. You're a little tiny speck on a surf farm somewhere, right? But instead, you as an individual have really great potential. You have potential to do great things. You have the ability, okay, if you choose, to do amazing things, to lead, to govern, to make discoveries, all those kind of things as possible. You also see the start of the focus on reason and nature, which will really expand a lot more in the Enlightenment period. But people start talking a little bit about, why do things happen? Is it a religious idea, or is it, a legit kind of almost scientific reason for it, if you will? The biggest first change was rejecting the Aristotelian views. So Aristotelian being the ideas of Aristotle. And the Catholic Church actually accepted Aristotle's views on science and thinking, that kind of stuff, as essentially law. And most people had kind of not read other philosophers anymore. So Plato started coming back. Plato, who wrote about the Republic and those kind of ideas, and ruling with a group of people who could be, like the rich landowner kind of people who could rule. And Livy, who was a Roman historian, and Cicero, a Roman philosopher who wrote the idea of virtue and the ability of people. That people have the ability to do great things, and that they can do great things. We also see an expansion of the liberal arts. So now people start writing for fun. They start writing for a purpose. You didn't really see writing in the Middle Ages, according to some people, except for necessity. Okay, history, record keeping, that kind of stuff. Here you start seeing people start to write for different purposes and writing different things, not just a history or a record of accounts. Now instead it's poetry, and it's stories, and it's guidebooks, and those kind of things. Another part of this idea, and especially in terms of writing, is the idea of civic humanism. That being said, we're going to try and educate people for a reason. There wasn't much education going on in the Middle Ages. I mean, you may have a tutor, maybe, if you're learning some Greek or Latin or whatever. But, the main thing here was that it was to educate people to become good leaders. How do we make good leaders? And it's find a way to educate them, prepare them, by having them study great leaders of the past, like the Romans, okay, and then apply those ideas to the modern day. And the biggest thing, of course, humanism, is that it is secular. It is not based on the church, and in some cases, it actually questions the church openly. So let's talk about introduce you guys to a few humanist people, okay? There's more details as well in your text, we'll kind of mesh two together. But this guy is Petrarch. It was his written name. Petrarch was, we would call him essentially the first ever modern writer. And he was a guy who would start going through different documents and do deep textual analysis on Latin and Greek and the philosophers, and try to explain to people, what was really being meant. He would do it with the church as well. And so his goal was to try to look and see what was really going on and actually read the text analyze the text, and explain to everybody what this text is saying. There's a big difference because remember before, did people ever really actually read text? No, they didn't. He also was more famous even though as a writer. He was a poet, is what he did. And he wrote lyrical poetry. But the biggest thing is he wrote lyrical poetry not in Latin, but in Italian. And according to some, the modern day Italian language is actually mostly based off of Petrarch. He may have actually, in a way, created the modern day Italian language. And so he wrote this lyrical poetry, a lot of love poetry, sonnets, that kind of stuff. He wrote it for fun. He wrote for people to enjoy, for people to read. He's also maybe their nickname of the first ever tourist. He took time to travel, not just to go someplace for business or for whatever, but for fun and for learning. So he would go to different places in Europe to learn about them and then write about them. And so it wasn't just, I'm going to go here because I have to do business. I'm going to go here because I need to buy something. I'm going to go there for fun. I'm going to go there to learn. I'm going to go there to share with other people. But he is the way called, but with all his things he started doing, Petrarch is by far the father of humanism. A lot of friends, he had a lot of letters he would write back and forth to like Boccaccio, those kind of people. But it's definitely a very unique person in terms of the Italian Renaissance. We do have Boccaccio, so who kind of did write a lot about the idea of the encyclopedia, started to put together stories. His Decameron was all tales on social commentary, so he wanted to look at how did humans react, and in a way he did it on a purpose to tell people how they should behave. So maybe he would write these tales of social commentary, like in the Decameron, about how people reacted after the plague and that kind of stuff, as a way to how to behave. Does that make sense? You're trying to impart wisdom on people, saying, "Hey, look, listen. Here's how some people have." People in the past have reacted to things. Maybe you shouldn't do that. So especially about people's misbehavior, sexual misbehavior, economic misbehavior. He's kind of showing examples of the things you should not be doing, and ways to not live. It's kind of one of those things, hey, here's an example of not what not to do. He kind of wrote that, but still, he's writing in vernacular, in Italian, or is it being translated that way, and sharing his wisdom with people, with humans, hence the idea of humanism. Leonardo Bruni, actually maybe considered a more very, very important person of the Renaissance. He was the first person ever to coin the phrase humanism. He actually kind of used that phrase in his writings, but he was a Florentine, and he was a chancellor, one of the government people working with the Medici of Florence. But he also wrote a history of Florence, and in terms of writing and secular writing, he is considered the first ever modern historian. He's one of the first people since Herodotus, if you will, to actually write a history using primary sources and reading text to base off his history, not just telling a story or a legend. And so part of the thing he did was that he, basically made this real true history of Florence using sources, citing sources, saying, hey, we know it's true because this happened here, versus, trying to share some kind of legend or whatever, or kind of thing like that, as was done during the Middle Ages. Lorenzo Valla is by far one of my favorite people, and he said he had a really cool hat here, this picture. He was a textual analysis, and he actually went around looking for errors in text. And so he was an expert in reading Latin. He would go through and read the church documents and try to find errors. And the most famous error he found was an example of 8th century fraud by the Catholic Church in a document called the Donation of Constantine. Now, the Donation of Constantine is essentially a document stating that Emperor Constantine basically gave Rome to the Catholic Church and to the Pope to rule. That he used to say here is basically a papal state. The church gets this, that kind of stuff. Okay, that they given all this land. Yeah, never happened. He's like, yeah, I just read through this document. Didn't really happen. And so, yeah. I mean, he actually sit and compare stuff. He actually sit and compare the Latin Bible and the Greek Bible. Anyway, we went through the Latin Vulgate, the official Bible of our Catholic Church, and it's like, listen, I'm looking at the Latin one and the Greek one. The Greek one came first, and things don't mesh up here. And as I said, things aren't meshing up here. Things aren't really working here. There's errors. Is that there are errors in the Bible? We gotta fix. Kind of unique thing though. He was trying to tell the Catholic Church they're wrong. He remained a Catholic his whole life and never got kicked out of the church. That's kind of cool. Um, Marcello Festino may have been one of the most influential works, but he said he translated Plato. Plato, who talked a lot about, was kind of the anti-Aristotle in terms of how you rule through the words of a republic, especially his most famous work, The Republic. And so by translating that work from Greek to Italian and to the vernacular languages of Italy, um, he really did that. Plus, he also founded the Platonic Academy in Florida, so he actually founded his own schools based on the teachings of Plato. The idea of Plato's Republic and how people should rule through this group of really smart people, pretty much, and really set the tone for really set the tone for the Renaissance period of Europe. Pico della Mirandola, who was part of that Platonic Academy, who wrote a really famous book here called The Oration on the Dignity of Man. And it's really a famous work, it's kind of sociology wise, in her kind of saying, hey, humans got to have good potential. Humans aren't just bad people on Earth, sinning and doing terrible things. If humans are created by God, who is a good thing, they have the potential to do good as well. So not all humans are just bad people who are going to sin and go burn in eternal hell damnation. So you can do good things. He also said that humans had a free will. So basically identified the idea that humans have a choice. You can do good stuff. You can do bad stuff. Totally up to you. But it's kind of one of those, really groundbreaking ideas that timeless to show that, humans do have free choice. Humans do have kind of some ideas they can do on their own. One of my last ones here, and one of my most famous ones here by the way, is we got a guy in Baldassare Castiglione. We're going to read his book later on, too. His book called The Courtier. But he wrote about how to be a gentleman. He really changed the idea of how education is going to happen, saying that to be a true gentleman, to be a true, upstanding citizen of the upper class, you got to be educated. You cannot be some barbarian walking in, spitting, wiping your nose, scratching your butt, all those kind of things. You need to dress well. You need to be well educated. But you have to be able to fight, but you got to be able to dance. You got to be able to play the lute and the lyre and play music. You must be confident, but not cocky. You have to be modest as well. And essentially had this whole book on how to be a gentleman at this time. And essentially, he kind of explains the idea of being a Renaissance man, is that you cannot be a good man at this time and only be good at one thing. You have to be good at many, many, many things. And so you have to be good at a lot of stuff if you're going to be a gentleman of the Renaissance. Now, one of the biggest technological things that pushed all these writers and humanists forward was a printing press by Johann Gutenberg. This guy down here, awesome beard, by the way. You go, Johann. But he did this in the 1400s, where the idea of movable type, which he kind of stole from the Chinese, but whatever, right? But instead of trying to re-handwrite all these single books, books were so valuable at this time because they were handwritten. They took forever to write. They'd be chaining Bibles to the walls of the library because they're worth more than the library. If I'm instead of trying to handwrite these books, it just takes forever. Now the possibility to mass produce these books through the printing process and spread the idea of humanist literature, and not only spread it literature, but spread it in the idea of vernacular, in the language of the people who can read it. And so I have this ready for Monday, guys. For Tuesday, we'll talk about humanism on Tuesday. There'll be some reading I do along with this as well. Thank you all very much, and have a great day.